everyone, and welcome to the Forward Thinking Podcast. It's Chrissy here from CS2, and today's podcast we have Garrett Erny. Garrett is the founder of Poppy's Tech Aid. He's a marketing ops consultant, and today we're going to be covering a pretty hot topic. We've talked about a little bit over the past episodes, like with Sarah around hiring, marketing ops, but today Garrett's going to help us take us through what his experience was with the interview process and looking for a job in this crazy market. And so really this will be a chance for everyone to get insight into what the market is like right now, but also for those of you who are hiring in marketing ops, give you some tips for actually being able to hire in this crazy market. So welcome to the podcast, Garrett.
Thanks so much, Chrissy. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I've watched several episodes before and love what CS2 is doing and love this podcast. So thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. So we always start the podcast with everyone's kind of like background story, like their origin story of how they got into operations, because it's always different for folks. So if you could just talk us through, how did you end up to where you are today?
Yeah, love that. Told that story a million times and could tell a million more. So it wasn't, kind of a happy accident, if you will. So I was a, marketing major in college, and struggling to know what that even meant or what to do with it. And this is, 2012. And I was blessed enough to find a alumni to hire me at a rather large marketing firm called Hart Hanks at the time. And that was my first internship, if you will, an introduction to marketing. And they sat us all down like the first day. And, I'm 21, whatever it is, years old. And they're like, okay, what do you want to do? And the choices were, creative, which I knew wasn't me. There was content, which I knew wasn't me. And there was data and analytics. And that's the route that was a no-brainer, kind of out of default, but also I had a severe interest in the idea of big data, and was pretty good with Excel already and understood pivot tables and VLOOKUPs and all that. So anyways, that summer turned into a big research project, social media audit for a large car dealer. And, so it helped me understand, a lot of different things, obviously being in the office environment, starting off with working directly with VP of marketing, players on the direct, and it had a huge analytics team, data analytics teams, things like that. But that really kicked me off in this idea is okay, like this can not just be, something I did this summer. This can be a career if I really work at it. And while not flashy, nobody dreams of becoming a marketing operations expert when they're a little boy or girl. But it's a good career and a lucrative one if you play it right. So from that point on, graduated college, used the internship to get like a $35,000 a year job as a marketing operations associate at a media publisher. I'm from New Jersey, so I was in Princeton, New Jersey. And I don't know if I've ever worked so hard in my life, to be honest. And, it was more or less creating lead gen reports for our various clients. So, how it worked, a media publisher, let's say a CrowdStrike or somebody would come to us and say, we have this white paper, we want it, on your site because, everybody came to our site for security breach information and how to stop it and, technology to buy and things like that. So, just the lead gen reports for those security vendors were sometimes on a daily or weekly basis. But they also sat me down at that time and said, here's Marketo. And, I had no idea what Marketo was or what it did. I hadn't really heard of marketing automation, the term, even past college internship, anything of that nature. So that's when it really all changes in the sense that, okay, I'm managing at way too young and not knowing what I'm doing. I'm drilling into the HTML of emails. I'm flowing copy. I'm creating lists, learning all the fields and the field types and, starting pretty basic stuff, right? But important to lay the groundwork and managing programs, campaigns. We had we had clients all over the world. So managing that, time differences and scheduling. So it was early in my career, but really a blessing in disguise to get that experience And that kind of elevated me to my next step, which it was great, but I wanted to be closer to Philadelphia where I moved to. So I took a job
Mm.
as a marketing analyst, I think we called it, but similar type of role. But they had HubSpot at the time,
Mm.
and I was fully aware, I was not a HubSpot expert, and dove into that, assumingly thinking it was similar, which it was to an extent, sure, but we all know how different and similar they are. But
Mhm.
it was a great experience for 3 months, and then the CEO or somebody decides to pull the rug out and say, "Oh, I think we should switch to Pardot." Where I have a
Oh,
buddy,
no.
and yeah, so becomes okay. Well, that's also a blessing in disguise at a younger age, and being in MOPS early in your career. You see the not only the what it takes to implement and migrate
Mhm.
to a new tool, but also what it takes to sunset the old one and break up, if you will, and make sure you're grabbing the right things and not making the same mistakes. And organization and key, and this time, are you going to do it right with naming conventions, folders? So it gives you a fresh chance, and really to get to see all that. I'm in my mid 20s at this point, was really great. So I got enough with HubSpot to say, okay, I can definitely build my way up with this. I'm no expert by means. And then it was on the Pardot land, which, for 2 years or so, I was the in-house admin at a pretty big company that was bought out by JP Morgan a few years after I left. So it
Mm.
was a bigger role with more money thrown around and more a whole marketing team, if you will. Probably too many. If if we're all looking at it, 5, 7 years down the line. But so I managed Pardot, top to bottom, if you will, and of course, coming with that includes like talking to a lot of key players and different departments and the emails they want to get out. So I was all the email management, making sure pushing the Salesforce campaigns. Everybody's getting the alerts. We did a ton of sales reps in this particular instance, so customizing their signatures as assigned users and things of that nature. So,
Yeah.
and then really got crazy with dynamic content, and like regional segmentation, things of that nature, and product segmentation. But it was just really, so now I'm 26 and I have pretty, albeit brief, a decent amount of experience in HubSpot, Pardot, and Marketo, which
Yeah,
I
that's
even
great
I knew.
experience. Yeah.
Right, right, exactly. And it's like, okay, even I know these are the big players. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not thrilled, and I'm not saying you have to know what you do when you're 25, but I'm like, I'm going to do this, whether because I've had this background and fell into it in this way. So, anyways, this the speed the story up. I'm saying let's take these talents agency side. I feel like I can get more out of it. I've heard I never worked agency before, but it's 2000, late 2017, and I take a job at Square Two Marketing right outside of Philadelphia, and that's where I met Carrie Baldwin and some great other friends and colleagues and mentors I've known for the past 5, 6 years now. But anyways, it starts off, hit the ground running in agency life, right? I was a marketing operations consultant. It was a HubSpot shop, this one, but
Mm.
we did have a few Marketo and Pardot clients trickle in, so I handled all three. Again, I think the versatility was big. I was definitely under my pricing myself at that time, but just happy to be out of the in-house role. Still making more than the in-house role, but definitely under pricing probably my skills. But I loved it in a sense. It was faster paced. I wasn't sitting around. I wasn't waiting as much. Waiting on clients, sure, is part of life, but I wasn't waiting on my colleague in the cubicle next to me, like who I could see just right there, not writing the email I needed, so it takes some frustration out of it for
Mm. Mm.
sure. For a person, my type, I guess. So, anyways, that worked out great. I met a lot of really great people who are still there today at Square Two. But I decided to follow my boss, and carry, take Carrie's advice, and move elsewhere, and don't regret that at all. So that's when I moved on, an East Coast kid in New Jersey still, to Spear Marketing out in California. So adjusted to the time difference type, and that is still dealing with this today, and it's part of our everyday work environment, really.
Yeah.
So especially coast to coast, I actually have a client in the UK even, so it's become global almost now.
Yeah.
So anyways, at Spear, another great agency. A lot of good friends and people. Spent 2+ years there. Same type of role. They were more of a Marketo shop, more focused than I took on, mostly in the beginning, at least Pardot and the few HubSpot clients they had, and then just transitioned into, towards the end, mostly Marketo work. And that was good in a way too, because I didn't want to promote myself as just a Pardot HubSpot person, because I started with Marketo, and it just, like, the path for a couple of years took me away from Marketo, mostly. And then, you came back to it at the end, and you realize that a lot of enterprise companies use Marketo, so there's some money there, for sure. So it was great to have, I'm certified in all three, right? HubSpot to the best you can be certified, but Pardot consultant, MCE, I know I could go further in that, Marketo, but I have this basis, and I say, all right, well, what's next in my career? I'm pretty not bored, but I've kind of proven I can do this consultant thing, whether it be on the side, full time freelancer, whether it be, for an agency. So Carrie, the huge mentor and blessing she was to me, and Dana Harder, also co-owner at Unreal Digital Group, they offered me the director of Martech job. Um, and they were growing at the time. I think there were like 5 to 6 people. I did a lot of consulting work for them on the side, MOPS related. So it was a natural fit to, just step into that role. And it was great. I needed that experience. I was, still too junior in the other roles to talk to people such as yourselves, VPs of marketing, directors of Martech, directors of sales, to be in that room and actually understand what those folks go through on a daily basis, and
Yeah.
have it how it all relates back to revenue, and talk, and just having those conversations and meeting those types of people. The 2021 was a big year for me in the director of Martech role, and I loved it. I really did. And having a small team, I grew out my team to, like, 3 folks, 4 folks, and they were great. And they were, and they're still in the process of growing and, building out their MOPS careers. And I hope they have good things to say about me, because I have great things to say about them. But it just became what happens in that type of role at an agency, and what happened to me at least is it became, I was trying to wear that hat, the director hat, manage those responsibilities, manage 4 folks, but also I was still doing way too much of the advanced to somewhat advanced implementation work, or doing, if you will, the yeah, I mean, actually in the
Technical
weeds, if
work.
you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, the technical
Hmm.
work in the weeds, right?
Yeah.
So it just became a balance of, I can't catch up. I don't know if I could hire 12 more people at the rate things are going. We're going to scale, and just, the clients are not stopping. I mean, it's in desperate need of this type of across the board
Hmm.
support. So, and that's, where I made my decision to move to where I am today and freelance. And what I'll tell my story, and was, I wasn't sure that I'd do that, and start Poppy's Tech Aid up again, and freelance under that name. So I was interviewing with the hat of, I can do this, but also I'm open to full time roles for the right fit. So I
Yeah.
probably interviewed, like, I'm talking at least 2 dozen, 3 dozen, maybe. I don't know, over the span of 6 weeks or so. And it became clear, and that's what we'll talk about. And I hope we learn a lot about it.
Yeah, so just for everyone listening, I mean, I think you have had like a very broad mix of experience between like working in house, working at agencies, working at a bigger agency, working at a smaller agency, and so I think for a lot of folks in MOPS, I think that can be a really good experience to have, especially for folks who are in MOPS. Like I always suggest, like kind of both, like in-house and agency. Just I never got to work at an agency besides my own, but I would say like doing that consultancy work is super valuable because you get just that those reps in to do a lot. and you get
Mm.
to work, like you said, work with key stakeholders, but also working in house, like it just brings that business knowledge to the role, which I think for people who have never been in house, you don't have that empathy for the folks who what they're dealing with, and also look at things from a business perspective. So I do think that there's value to both. So but yeah, that's so we want to talk about the hiring, interviewing and searching for a job and experience that you had. Um, so it sounds like that started in December of 2021, and
Yeah.
as we know, the job market right now is pretty crazy. There's a lot of demand. There's like a lot of specific demand too. I think before marketing ops, I think didn't really get the attention that it probably deserved. I think a lot of folks even shy away from marketing ops just because no, like you said, no one really like learns how to do that job. You kind of just fall into it.
Hmm.
And there's
Hmm.
always a focus on demand gen. But now it's blowing up. There's so much demand with
Sure,
everything
sure.
moving digital. So, but yeah, so when you started your search, like what were some of the things that you saw from like an interviewing perspective? Like what were the differences, or what were some kind of things that you saw some people doing that worked well, and some things that you thought didn't work well?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Great question. And as you mentioned, Chrissy, I mean, it was a variety of it was even Fortune 500 MOPS roles, to smaller agencies, the large agencies. So it was a variety. So across the board, I saw, generally speaking, I saw a lot of, I'm not gonna, I wasn't able to talk to who I would consider my direct report, or even the report above them, on the first call. It was usually a more junior recruiter
Mm,
or a screener, if you will,
yeah.
and that's fine and great. But what happens is, like, then they start, what the frustration happens is, then they start reading, literally looking over and peering at their other screen, so it's obvious. They start reading questions off some sort of, who the director of Martech or somebody gave them, like, what would you do in this scenario? And they don't even know what they're saying, in a sense, if you will. So they're asking questions, and I'm giving thoughtful and laid out responses. And what does that mean? Like, right? Like, if they're not understanding what I'm saying back to them, maybe they're taking notes or pretending to take notes. I don't know. But there's definitely been times where, these are larger in-house roles. I noticed, um, you know, I didn't make it to round two, and I'm like, that's kind of a lot, to, like, and that told me, like, there's not, something's not quite right there. I'm confident in my response. Like, the salary was apparently in range and things like that. My concern there is you don't have the right people on the call initially, and
Yeah.
maybe you're getting to the right person, to actually interview that MOPS candidate.
Yeah.
But I'm frustrated. They're gonna, probably the average human being is going to be frustrated. It's another layer that doesn't need to be there. Like, let's get the hiring manager, or the direct report in front of them right away, and not kind of waste our time with a screener, if you will. And that's great. I know it's good and dandy, and especially at bigger companies. Well, will you fit with the culture? This, that, and the other thing. It's so hot right now. Like, you don't want to waste time, and I'll get to that, how long it takes to respond and make a decision too. But so that was one big thing I noticed. And two, the second one is kind of the what we're doing to screen. Okay, that screener comes in, you make it to the second round, you get to the direct report. They probably want something to actually prove, your certificate of whatever. Your MCE isn't, just all baloney, because certs can be, at times, deceiving. But do you know your stuff, right? And even if you don't
Hmm.
know your stuff, do you did you tell the truth of what you do know, and could you prove that via a test? So a lot of what I saw is like standard things coming over to me, like, all right, this take home test. One was as simple as, like, basically, do you know what a VLOOKUP is? Like, what would you
Oh,
do in this, scenario? Yeah. And I thought that was a little too light,
junior?
right? Yeah, right. A
Yeah.
little too light for the role, which was a director level role,
Oh,
which was
wow.
odd, but
Which
very
is also
odd.
not really telling. You're like, what am I going to be doing as a director if you're asking me if I
That,
can do a V lookup? Like, shouldn't I have like people on my team doing this? Or even if I do them, like, is that really the right question, right?
I don't think it was a right fit for the. I don't know if it got mixed up
Title
somehow for a
or
director level role, but
yeah.
maybe it was for the consultant level role. They just gave me both. That was the simplest one I had, but there were ones where multi-step, if you will, where it's like, okay, step one, and again, they don't want to give access to instances, so it's like, what would you do in this scenario if you had a world, you serve to APAC, North America, whatever it is, EMEA? How would you segment? Okay. And then, like, that's A, like, how would you segment? And then, okay,
And they're
great. You're
giving you
using,
access to their system?
no, they're not giving you access to
Oh,
their
okay. I was
system.
gonna
It's
say,
more like
yeah.
that's like the frustrating, like, I don't know, it's the frustrating part, but it adds a layer to it where, like, it's in
You're like,
hypothetical land, or
it depends. It depends.
you have to be vague, but like, what they use per se.
Right.
If they
Yeah.
use Pardot or HubSpot, right? So then you say, okay, let's say it's Pardot. Like, okay, you can use lists or you can use tags and segment that way. You got to make sure you're not, the United States isn't spelled US, U.SA, like all that data
Right.
standardization stuff. So, like, you give them those steps. They're like, okay, great. Well, what would you do from that point, to build out, a multi a 5-touch nurture that, would include, break it down by region. And then it's like, okay, well, you go in the engagement studio program and, you build your logic and you can branch out, whatever. But then you're saying to yourself, as like somebody of our knowledge, like, all right, well, you're kind of making money off me because, like, I mean, at what point there's a, like, I'm giving you knowledge that you would have to pay for an agency? Like, it's not right, maybe as detailed as it would be, but like, it's just too much. And then, like, okay, 3 days go by. Great, this is approved. Okay, it's approved. Next step, and then, step two, you give them the engagement studio back, or the idea, not the extra because you can't log in. The idea of what you would do there and how you would branch it out. And okay, and then, like, what completion actions would you use? So it's almost like that to me. Two things. It's too long, too many steps, too much back and forth feedback, but also, whether it's part others, Marketo or HubSpot, I don't see that in that sense. That was too specific to Pardot. I don't think the questionnaire or the screening should be that specific to
No.
any of the tools in general.
No. I
Like,
agree with
right,
you.
like, you either you have a sense and an oversight of, what MOPS is and RevOps and, list and tags and, the content and all that good stuff, and the terminology is slightly different, of course, across the tools, but, like, you need to have in my opinion, what needs to be out there, and hopefully Poppy's Tech Aid and myself can build something like this, is like a questionnaire, a quiz, if you will, and said quiz is not specific to any one tool.
Yep.
It's a series of, let's say the light version is 20 or 25 questions, multiple, and they're multiple choice, and it's kind of not rethinking the wheel. It's like kind of laying out scenarios, like, what would you do in this scenario, or why wouldn't you want to do this? What would be
Hmm.
the consequences? And then, seeing how, and then, if they score 25 out of 25, obviously that's a good fit. You probably should hire them. If they're, like, in that 15 to 20 range, I would say still hire them. You can work with them. If they're, below 10, I would say that's probably not a good fit or something like that. And, like, taking all those, and it's got to be a variety of things. It's got to be like, do you know your tokens and personalization? Do you know list, questions? Do you know, even how to organize data? What would you do? Um, One of the questions I like to ask on interviews is, why wouldn't you want to, put, you know, let's say you have a blank first name, and you want to and you want to determine, or you want to you want to mark that, and you mark it to be determined, and you spell it out, or TBD,
Yeah.
to say you could go back to it. The problem is you're sending an email, or somebody else on your team is sending an email with hi first name, and instead of coming up, whatever the default
The
was, if it
default.
was blank, right, it's coming up as TBD or to be determined or placeholder, and it's just a silly like extra step that you're actually going to end up probably shooting yourself in the foot for. So
Yeah.
like that can be phrased in a multiple choice question, and to me, if like somebody can recognize that, regardless if they only know Mailchimp or they're a Marketo
Hmm.
certified expert, like that's a good sign. So
Yeah, I think a few things that you mentioned, and I can take it from the lens too at CS2 with our hiring, but like I agree with you. Like, I think having a junior person that doesn't know MOPS and trying to like screen them with a bunch of like MOPS questions like doesn't make sense. I think if you are going to do screening, make that a very quick call, like 15-minute call or something, and really get a sense for like the culture fit with someone in HR, people operations, and get a sense for like, is our salary on the right point, or what
mhm.
their goals are for their job, what are they looking for with like a path. And that's kind of what we do, because I know that our people operations person would understand that and see like, is this a good fit, like, and we sometimes have a few questions like, what their experience is with certain tools and familiarity and things like that. But it's really just to get a sense of, one, are they going to show up? Because some people
Yeah,
don't.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then
yeah.
are they interested, and really get the ball rolling and schedule the time and talk through the process. So I think, yeah, I think having someone junior who's just not going to understand the answers just doesn't give you a good sense of, you might be missing out on good talent. But then trying to speed up that process, I think your multiple choice kind of quiz is a good one, and having that directed to the skills that you're looking for.
Mhm,
At CS2, we look for a broad range of skills because we're hiring, consultants, and we're pretty agnostic. So we're not like a tool or marketing automation based agency. We're a marketing ops agency. So it's the questions that we do
mhm.
ask are like three, and they're more just trying to get a sense for like, how does this person talk about marketing operations, and for certain things like attribution or something. And they're pretty short questions. And then we have like
Mhm.
a very like we have an assessment that takes like about 5 minutes to go through, to just like rate yourself on these different areas from like 1 to 5. And it's not like, oh, this isn't going to take you to the next level. It's more, okay, when we have our next interview, we're just going to pinpoint things that you rated you high on. Let's talk through those. Like, tell me about your comfort level with them,
Yeah,
why it's
yeah.
important, projects that you've done, and then things that you scored lower on. It's like, okay, are those areas that you want to improve, or why haven't you had the experience of those? Is that because you haven't had the experience? So it's more just to try and make the hour that you have with them very direct and very specific, so you can really understand, because you can't, like, you have number of interviews and the length of the interviews, like, we can't expect candidates to go through like 4 interviews or like 2 hour interviews or 3 hour interviews in one day. Like, one, MOPS people are super busy. They don't have blocks of time in their calendar for that. And then
Right.
also in this market, your competitor, the other,
Yeah, somebody
person
else
they're
is going to give them
interviewing.
the job, right? Like you
Exactly.
can't. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think that's a really good point with the quiz, because like it's something they can do a multiple choice, 10,
Relatively
15
quickly, right?
questions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. 20 minutes. That's what I'm thinking. And
And they're
I
probably
love
like, "Oh, I
your
want to do
rating.
it."
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of fun. It's a challenge too, or and but I love the rating system. CS2 has in place because that will catch a lot of two things: folks that should be more proud of their skills and how much they do know, and then folks that say they know a bunch that know very little. Um,
Right.
and that's where
Yeah.
you screen that out very early. And yeah, the 15-30 minute call just to see if the person is you know just a fit for the company. Totally agree, and see the purpose of that too. But in my example, that wasn't the case. Like if you're firing off marketing operations questions after you're asking, the high level stuff. And, I don't know. To me, they can be two separate entities.
One thing I had a question on is when you looked at certain roles, because I know this comes up a lot too, is just what the expectations are for a director, especially once you get past like a senior manager. What is expected of a director? Because some organizations, I think a director has people on their team, they're managing people, they are managing the roadmap, they are being strategic. Other companies are like, oh yeah, you're a director, but you're one person in
You're
marketing
also
ops.
going
And
to do all the tasks. Yeah, sure.
what did you feel? What do you feel like you saw across the board? And did you feel like some of the job descriptions weren't very like didn't really line up to like what was kind of described as the role like once you got in the interview process?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, the example of the director level role that gave me a pivot table Excel test. I mean, it's like kind of the what we're talking about not aligning. I think anything in static bullet points is tough, right? But what I
Right.
saw for the most part is the more in house it was you're kind of um, just managing folks or high level more strategic how it ties in the revenue. You create the attribution model, you create the nurture strategy, but you got somebody on your team that's actually doing the build. And hopefully when you walk in you trust those people and they're good at what they do and all that. But that was more again at these you in-house, I will say in-house medium SMBs, if you will, and then in-house enterprise, where it came to the other side of it, wearing many hats, doing all the tasks, managing a team of 3 to 4, maybe 2 to 4 was typically the range. But also using other agencies sometimes,
Hmm.
using consultants, looking on up things like Upwork. That was when it came to the agency roles I was interviewing for, and that director Martech. I think it's still, particularly in the agency side, is still being flushed out in terms of what that really means to be a director of Martech.
Hmm.
Even when I started, we weren't quite sure, and after a
And do you
year,
mean when you say director of Martech, do you mean that working in an agency that also does like marketing, like for like marketing consulting? Because yeah, just want to
not
give a
everybody would. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they have to do marketing, Martech consulting or sales tech consulting. Yeah.
But would you? So when you talk about an agency that's hiring for a director in Martech, are they also for the client doing things like campaign development and like content? Because I think for example, for like us at CS2, like we only do marketing ops, like growth ops consulting, which kind of like falls into some of the sales op camp, but we don't do any, we do go to market strategy, but no, like, oh, we're going to help you
Mm.
with creative or we're going to do like marketing campaigns. Do you feel like you saw more of a director of MarTech as a support function for the companies doing those campaigns? Or were you looking across the board where that or agencies that were specific to just marketing ops?
That's a great question. No, it was I would say, more interviewing for full service agencies who just had
Yeah.
a slice of, Martech, and it's that's fine. That's what I was used to at UDG or Unreal Digital Group and Spear and
Yeah.
even Square Two. So to me, that was natural. Which means your agency is pretty big, right? It's not a team of six. If you have different departments. So yeah, that was what I mostly interviewed for, and I didn't really. I would not be one writing content
Yeah.
and content development. So, but yeah, it's a great question and a great point. So I just think you're expected to wear more hats,
Hmm.
agency side, where it becomes like what's too much, and then like is the agency in a rapid growth period? If they're hiring you, probably has that role been fully fleshed out? Like, sure, in a job description it has, but was there somebody there before you? Are you taking somebody's place? Or you? One of my questions was, am I replacing somebody or is this a new role? Because that's important to know. If it's a new role, right? You're kind of like starting fresh and got to design it from scratch. If they had a basis for what this other person should have been doing, you have at least the understanding of what the company would expect of you.
And that's a
Um,
good question to ask in house too. Like how much turnover has there been? Like I think
oh
some people
yeah.
are afraid to ask some questions that I think maybe give you more insight, especially if the company isn't like is shying away from really talking about the specifics of how you'd work in the role, who you're working with. I think sometimes companies have had some turnover and so they're nervous about talking about like the current state of what's going on in an honest fashion. And the person ends up in that role and they're like, this is not what I
Yeah.
thought. So I think for people who are hiring, like being as honest as you can, but also spinning it like there's always like opportunity because no company is, and I would say even for like when I talk about companies in house, like it's very hard to find ones that are perfect. It's hard to find, any company that there is an opportunity for change and stuff like that. But I think for yourself to protect like yourself as an interviewee, it's good to maybe dive into like, how many folks have done marketing ops in this role before me? Like how long was the person there before? That can be a bit tricky to try and ask. So like, why are you asking that? But I think you can maybe spin and say like more just out of interest, just trying to see like how long that person was there and what were some of the reasons where maybe they weren't successful, because some things that maybe make someone like unsuccessful isn't always going to make you unsuccessful. And maybe some people
Mhm.
are up for a challenge and like working cross functionally, but some people don't, and maybe that's why they end up not being successful in the role. So I think looking out for yourself like first and digging deep in this market especially, like
Right.
it's okay, go for it, ask those questions.
Yeah, what do you got to lose in this market, especially?
Yeah.
It's it's better to know upfront now. And as a hiring manager, like it's kind of the same thing. Ask the questions you really need to ask, like put it out there, and um, you know it's there is no perfect candidate and there is no perfect job. Like the goal is to get to the best fit where you can both be happy with the results and grow from there. You're obviously gonna have streams of pains, but like you kind of know within 90 days, right, if you made a huge mistake or not on either end. Maybe not 90 days, maybe it's 180, 6 months or
Yeah.
so, but there's a feeling on both sides where it's like, oh, we may need to reevaluate this, and that stinks because it's a huge investment, it's a huge time suck, for both sides, and nobody likes to, have those types of conversations.
And I think to your point too, I will say like even for companies that um maybe are hiring a new role. So one thing at CS2 that we do is like we clearly define like what each level like does and what the expectations of those are and how they would get measured for success, because we also bonus our team, so it's really clear of what they should do, but it's also really clear of like what the role is ahead of them, because you want to make sure that they know what should they be doing or what skills should they be looking at to help get promoted, and doing a fraction of those roles will ensure that you can then get promoted into the role. So I think even when we come up with a new position or new role or hiring person into that, we make it really clear in the interview process. This is what's expected of you. This is what you're going to be
Hmm.
doing. And this is how you're going to be measured. And I think that works really well with not making it of like a scary thing for people coming into the role, because we've already done the thinking. And I think companies need to realize you need to start doing some of this thinking as a differentiator, because you're going to lose out on talent when they feel too scared that they're going to come into a role where they're like not going to succeed or it's not clearly
Hmm.
defined, and then they're going to end up having to work like crazy hours because maybe they end up having to do three jobs. I've had to do that in the past. So
Yeah,
I think
yes,
and
same,
everyone's
same,
had this
right,
different experiences. So I think in this market, the more upfront you can be as a hiring manager, the better. And then to your point, it makes it so that you don't have to try to figure out what questions to ask or that you feel insecure of like, am I getting the full picture of what's actually going to be expected of me?
right, exactly, well said. Okay,
But okay,
what else we
so
got?
I
Yeah.
think so. Obviously, you're not working in an in house role, you're not working at an agency. You
Oh.
are, you know, you started Poppy's Techgate. And so I think you had different experiences in your job search, but what were some of the things that made you come to the conclusion of like, okay, I'm gonna go out and try this on my own?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. So that experience led me, towards the end of January, I made, came to the realizations. I filed, I think, mid January, but so I guess mid to late January. It's like I'm exhausted, right? Like, I don't have any feeling very strongly to any one company or any like I need to go in house and do Pardot or I need to go back agency and do all, and that's the thing with in house too, right? You're really going to be managing one map or one marketing automation platform. So anyways, I said I've spent the better part of the last 5 6 years, well, better part of the last decade. We all seen that chart that came out a few days ago with the Martech tools. Like
Yeah.
watching just the burst of Martech tools and that experience I explained in the beginning of this call in terms of like being blessed enough to touch Marketo, Pardot, and HubSpot and have that background and then take it from there. So it's like, all right, well, I know a few folks. Let me go talk to them. And one is Ann Angel, who owns our own small agency consulting firm, Martech, Marketo Wizard, and a former boss of mine. Another is
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Steve Reinhardt and John Larson. They own their own shop as well in the web dev side. Um, so having just transparent conversations and and specifically was like, yeah, I think you'll love it. I certainly think you can do it. And from there the rest is history. You start by, if I had to give one recommendation to somebody attempting to do this, is that you got to have the network to stand
Yeah.
behind you. I had people like Ann and Steve and John and Carrie, and the list goes on, and Dana, in the sense that like they saw my skills, and not only that, clients who believed in my skills, people on LinkedIn that would write me recommendations if I asked, things of that nature, who appreciate my support over the years, things like that. The next thing I went and did is, while I'm not a huge fan, signed up for Upwork and slapped my face on there, my profile, and I two blessings came out of that. One, a few actual opportunities, and B, I got to start working when I wasn't as busy in the beginning with a nonprofit. And I wouldn't have met him, and it's the one client I still have on Upwork. But to be able to help out with a nonprofit at half my rate and all that was just still a great blessing, and we can talk about that maybe a little bit later. But anyways, so the Upwork is flowing in. We all know Upwork takes a big percentage. That's not ideal. So my network is there.
I actually don't know if everyone knows that if you haven't been on Upwork before. So, what do some of those
Tell the people,
websites
yeah.
do?
So Upwork, just like if you're a freelancer, Upwork is a place to go to where
Mm-hmm.
companies post jobs, Pardot support, Marketo support,
Mm-hmm.
web dev support, whatever it is. And let's say you sign for $100 an hour, you and the client
Mm-hmm.
agree. At first, Upwork's going to take 20%.
Mm.
So you're only going to see 80, and the client's actually going to pay 100. So that's up until $1,000 is made, which in retrospect isn't a ton. But then
Yeah.
after that, it's still I think 15%. No, I'm sorry, it's 10% of that. So your $100 is then 90. Okay, we're getting better, but that's up to 10,000. So, and then once you hit 10,000, it becomes 5%. So that's, I guess, livable. But 20%, especially you get crushed in the beginning. So it's just something to think of. And like, especially if you're starting off and you need revenue. So me in early to mid February, it was like, oh man, I'm killing myself. So from there, going back to the network, all of these folks I interviewed with, right, in-house agency side, some of them reached back out to me. I reached back out to some of them and their current clients. So whether that's freelancing, white labeling on the agency side, mostly in situations where it can be overflow, but it's situations where I've come across the client isn't happy or things are going awry, or it's
Mm.
overflow. And then I have now going up to four actual, including a nonprofit, four actual direct B2B clients where and three of those I interviewed with in the past for a full-time role, and it was like, hey, you don't really need that full-time person based on what I'm seeing. I can come in, do it for X amount of hour. It's a lot cheaper than a full service agency. We can help each other out. My skills. The reason you didn't go with me was probably I wanted too much money, is what I'm hearing. But anyways, so that worked out. So having that network, and all those interviews paid off, whether I was offered the chance to move on in the role or not. Um, so that was that, and you got to believe in your skills. You got to believe in yourself, right? You don't want to be out there on your own if you don't believe in yourself. If you don't have that network,
Yeah.
if you haven't thought it out,
I think having
if
the
you're
network is key, like key point. I
yeah.
think otherwise you just need to be really good at selling or selling yourself or just looking for people. And I think that even though there is a lot of demand, you might just be out there just kind of like piecemealing together a bunch of like kind of technical like projects or something. Like there's a lot of work,
Mhm.
but I think when you can find some of those deeper relationships within your contacts to get you connected with companies that already off the gate have someone vouching for your talent, I think
Right.
that starts off a really longer lasting relationship.
Oh, those referrals are just huge, and
Yeah.
everybody seemed to got like if I can't do it, I'll refer. Web dev work isn't my specialty, so I'll refer to
Yeah.
John and Steve. So passing it in a network of friends, and of course, we can give each other 10% of the 12-month total or things like that, which is also always cool. But yeah, the network is number one. You touched on this, and I didn't. You gotta sell yourself too, is and be personable, and not be one that's shy, because you do have to go out there and do that piece as well.
Yeah.
You got to be used to organizing and time managing yourself, because that one time card just turned into however many, and
Yeah.
it depends. All clients are different, use different tools, right? Some use Harvest, some use Deal,
Mhm.
like and and then you got your internal stuff, right? Like I didn't know how much of a PIA taxes were until I
Yeah.
opened my own, LLC, and I didn't
Mhm.
know how much, like, okay, like I got to open my own bank account, and
Mhm.
keep this all separate, and do all this Excel work to make sure I'm making enough, and where are my expenses going, and QuickBooks, and blah blah blah.
Mhm. Or
So
timing too. People forget like you don't just get paid right away or every 2 weeks like your normal job. Most
no,
companies have like a net 60. Sometimes they're notorious for paying late. So you do want a good amount of cushion going into it. If you do like want to maintain a consistent kind of cash flow, the uptime in the first like few months can be maybe not what you expect because you are waiting for those POs to be paid.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Luckily, I haven't experienced that yet. My first 90 days, knock on wood, and but
A
I've heard of
personal
it, and
contractor, yeah, can tend to get paid a bit faster than
yeah.
if you have like a traditional SOW with. But I know when we first started CS2, some were okay, and then you realize, oh, the more I work with different companies, different sizes,
Oh yeah,
you need to account for that. But I think to your point, like, yeah, you need to be ready to kind of be all sides of the house for yourself. Like, there's a lot of great things that can come with like owning your destiny and starting your things. But for some folks, like, yeah, maybe they don't want to sell, maybe they don't want to do their own marketing, maybe they don't want to be their own operations person and deal with like
right.
taxes and
All
stuff
those
like that.
hats.
So
Yeah.
I think for across the board, and I know we're coming up on time, but
Hmm.
I think when you throughout this process, I think it's a few things that I hear here is like one, being like a champion for yourself, really trying to understand or go into your process knowing exactly kind of what you're looking for, and then trying to really find the right place that's going to suit that. And then if you feel like you don't find a place, or and then you realize you might have these aha moments of like, actually, I think what might be best for me is to do this. And then having the experience of a great network, especially if you go from working in agency or in-house gives
Yeah.
you a lot of great contacts, potentially learning from there. And that's the one thing I love about MOPS. Like the network is just so amazing. Like so many people want to help. And so if you do know of any other people have gone solo, or I'm sure, Garrett, you would probably chat to anyone who's interested. They can do that. And then I always share hiring advice with people. What questions should I ask? How should I interview? All the things we're going through now. There's a lot of folks who are in the same boat trying to hire or are looking for a job and can give that advice. So yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, all your tips, and I look forward to seeing what's next with Poppy's Tech Aid. We'll have to
Well,
have
thank
you
you
on
so
to talk
much.
about some of
Yeah.
the cool projects you do.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on and having this conversation with me. I hope this helps the listeners, and yeah, looking forward to following all CS2's podcasts along the way.
Awesome. Yeah, well, if you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends, and we'll see you on the next episode of Forward Thinking. Have a good one. Thanks, Garrett.